Get in the know. Non-stop Vikings talk. It's Purple Daily on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
Football.
Welcome into Purple Access, actually, which we do every Thursday. Rotating guests, of course, Tyler Fornes of VikingsWire.com every other Thursday. And today, it's my buddy Chip Scoggins, Star Tribune sports columnist, a guy that covers the Vikings, obviously, very closely. My former partner in crime on the Vikings beat, Ross Brendel producing, which we appreciate. And this show, before I talk about anything to do with the Purple, I'm going to talk about something very near and dear to my heart, and I know Chip Scoggins' heart. And that is the beers from Surly, which includes Before I Die. It includes Logic Bomb. But Chip Scoggins, I'm going to get out of the way so you could talk about your personal fave, Furious, which is the flagship beer of one of the great breweries in this town.
So I had a long day of work yesterday. I was out at the Vikings. I had a couple meetings. I had different things, had to write a column. Got home, took the dog for a long walk. As I settled in for the evening, you know what I went to first?
Oh, yeah.
I don't normally say Furious till the end because that's like,
Yeah.
you know, that's the king of beers. There's no, it's at the mountaintop. I had two last night, Judd.
Oh boy. Tall boys?
Tall boy. Yeah, you got to have the tall boys. I'm sorry. I'm the 4-pack guy.
I don't blame you. So anyway, be like Scoggins. Check out the great variety of beers from our friends at Surly. All right, let's get to it. I did hear you asking Justin Jefferson some questions, and I actually want to start there.
Yeah.
Justin Jefferson, how great is the visual, Chipper, of him telling you guys and gals out there at TCO on Wednesday that he was put into an ambulance to check to make sure, like, you know, I'm sure he didn't have broken ribs, collapsed lung, internal bleeding. Thankfully, it all turned out fine. But telling you guys that he was then watching the game on his phone and in the hospital, in the emergency room, and shouting and screaming, the visual on that one to me, it was just outstanding.
It was outstanding. So Lindsay Young from Vikings.com, she actually asked him about Nick Mullins and what, you know, she said, obviously he came in after you left, but what do you think? He said, yeah, I was watching the game and he came in, he looked confident and all this. And sitting there thinking, I was like, so when he finished his answer, I was like, wait, it's like, you're watching the game on your phone? And
I heard your question.
And he said, yeah. I said, and presumably in the emergency room while you're waiting for tests? He said, oh yeah, I was yelling and screaming and the people that were actually hurt or more, that were seriously hurt were probably mad at me. So it was, the visuals of that, I could just imagine. He said the sirens were going. I mean, obviously that was to get him to the hospital, so he's not sitting in traffic. But he said in the back of this ambulance, I assume they're checking him, doing different things, and he's got the phone out watching the game like
My only question that didn't get asked was, did they insist he lay down on a gurney?
I was wondering.
So
I was trying to see,
watching the game.
And they're doing the IVs or whatever. I wonder. I always wonder, like, he went back to the locker room, so I assume he changed out of his football uniform, or was he still in his pants and that type thing? But he was very grateful of the care he got. Someone asked him if people in the emergency room recognized him when he comes. I mean, he's obviously not sitting there with everybody. They're gonna take him right back.
Right.
But he alluded to this a couple times, Judd. He didn't go into it, but he said, I was frustrated. I wanted to be out there on the field, but once I came to the sideline, there were circumstances that said I couldn't keep playing. Now, Ben Gaslin told me, my colleague said he was in that blue tent for only 2 minutes. So something got flagged right away by the medical staff that they had enough concern to send him on to make sure that he said no internal bleeding or broken ribs or whatever. But I do wonder if what happened with Jordan Hicks earlier this year
maybe
has led this team to be, you know what, because that could have been way more serious outcome for Jordan if they hadn't reacted the way they did and get him to the hospital. So it's always, they're going to decide on when any player, but with Justin Jefferson, if you're concerned that there might be something else going on internally, that absolutely was the right call. And thankfully it wasn't anything serious.
Absolutely. All right. Your thoughts on the switch from Dobbs to Mullins. And I don't know if you saw this or not, but Hall of Fame quarterback Kurt Warner put out a basically 20-minute breakdown. It was well done. I mean, the dude, was great about how Dobbs did not play a bad game, about how he didn't think Dobbs should be benched. Your thoughts on the decision that I thought that they actually made late in that game to finally pull the plug on Dobbs and go to Mullins.
Yeah, I watched the first 5 minutes of it, and hey, this is a Hall of Fame quarterback breaking it down and showing you exactly like his bewilderment with some of the route concepts and guys being in the same area. And clearly his receivers let him down too. I mean, how many drops did they have in that game, Judd, where
they lead the league now?
So to sit here and say it was all Josh Dobbs' fault, I mean, that's being completely unfair. But I also think you're coming off, a 4 interception game. The offense was not going the way he wanted. I'm sure O'Connell did things differently in this game after talking about how he wanted to kind of mold the offense around Dobbs' skill set. And I saw Alec Lewis from Athletic had a thing about shotgun and how they were in a shotgun a lot more than they had been before. But just to my untrained eye, I thought it'd be more. I mean, there was the one bootleg I know he got to Hawkinson, but it still felt like he was in the pocket a lot and not as much moving around. And maybe that's just being unrealistic, right? Maybe that's just not – you can't scrap an entire offensive scheme and what you do with your quarterback in the short amount of time they had. So I don't know how difficult the decision was, but when you bring a guy in when the offense is not struggling and he shows some rhythm and the offense starts to do some things that you get a feel – I mean, it was – I didn't think there was any way they were going back to Dobbs. Now, this is not to say Nick Mullins is a miracle worker and he's, going to be great. But I think you and I talked about this before the game when we said we were trying to guess who we thought he would go with. I thought it'd be Mullins before the game because I think if they hadn't had to buy, it would have been Mullins. But I think because they had that extra week, it gave O'Connell time to think about more ways to kind of maximize Dobbs' skill set. But when he had that time and it still didn't translate into better performance, I think then he said, let's just go with the guy who knows the offense, who's been here longer, and we just have some more familiarity with everything.
And the interesting thing, though, to me, and this doesn't get discussed a lot, Seifert brought this up in the questioning to O'Connell a couple of days ago when O'Connell talked about, fairly briefly, especially for him, the switch. But Chipper, the thing that intrigues me, and it's not a huge deal, but it's definitely played a role, is the feeling of the training staff and O'Connell when Mullins was set to come back from that back. Like he came off IR, but the more you hear those guys talking about it, they're definitely, and when Seifert tried to ask Nick about what, transpired in practice, he was not going there.
No,
there's definitely more to that entire story than we know. And I do think that played a role in the hesitation to go to him until now.
Yeah. I don't know because of his back, and we still don't have a clear answer. Like what happened? Like why?
And it was practice, but then Mullins didn't want to talk about it, which leads me to believe, was it preseason? Because he did get hit a lot in preseason.
Yeah, it's clear based on, because I was there for Mullins' press conference yesterday, and he's not going to divulge what happened, the extent of it, But you don't get the sense that he was 100% going into that game. I don't know what the percentage is, but it didn't seem to affect him. But they just felt like maybe there was enough there, and maybe Dobbs needed one more chance. Because it was interesting. I can't remember who the announcers were, the game announcers were, but the play-by-play guy made the comment that they had talked to O'Connell in the production meeting, and he said something to the effect of, O'Connell said, "This is the time when teams have given up on Dobbs in the past."
Yeah, and
he wanted to give him one more. I don't know if he said one more chance or just a longer look than what he had. So, that tells me that he was going to exhaust this as much as he can to see if he can find that spark. But it's the damnedest thing, Judd. How do you explain the first 2 games where there was just this magical, and maybe it's the initial sugar high where a guy's just kind of reacting and off the cuff and freelancing and you can't sustain that. But it's crazy. The more familiarity he got with the offense, the worse he started to play. So I don't understand it.
Well, the Falcons game, I think, was a basically he didn't know the playbook, and O'Connell is literally just trying to get him through. And so I think that there was no question that Dobbs cut things loose. Here's the thing with guys like Dobbs, who seems like a brilliant dude. Like he might not be a brilliant football player, but he's a brilliant dude. And here's what I think, Chipper. I think guys like that, when they have nothing to lose, so like you get thrown into that Falcons game and everyone thinks you're going to suck, and you take a sack and it's a safety. I think that you just say, screw it, let's play.
Yeah.
I think the more that there's an expectation, and here's the difference, and Warner doesn't. So the one thing where I'd be curious to talk to Kurt about his film breakdown of Dobbs, where I think it gets a bit murky, is this. Because he didn't break down the Bears game. He broke down the Raiders game. And in the Bears game, Dobbs had 4 picks, right?
Yeah. Yes.
In the Raiders game, Warner on the coaching film kept saying, where's he supposed to throw? He's not open. He's not open. Well, the reality is in this league, guys aren't open. It's why you throw the anticipatory ball, right? So I think what happened was in Dobbs' defense, I think he was so freaked out by his failures against the Bears that he wasn't going to force a ball. Well, if you don't force a ball, like that's the whole thing O'Connell has talked about with Kirk. You got to at times make a risky pass. So I think it's sort of steamrolled. And I think the more that Dobbs plays, the worse he gets, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And it's you're right, because some of those, he's saying there's nowhere to throw here. And you do wonder if those 4 interceptions and how much he's heard about, we can't turn the ball over and just play it safe.
Right.
Made you a little gun shy to throw it into tight windows or to take the chances that you might otherwise, or that you have to, because there aren't. Now, some of that might have been they're also, I mean, I trust Kurt Warner. He said these route combinations don't make sense, or they're not conducive.
That actually concerned me.
There's probably some, I mean, like this is a high level quarterback who knows what he's talking about when he sees it. So when he explains it to that way, you're like, wow, I mean, that's not something I'm going to be able to pick apart, just watching it live when you're watching it. So I found it interesting. I want to go back and watch the rest of it today. I just got to see the first 5 minutes. But so I think there's a lot of credence to what he said, but Judd, you can't get past the fact that, you had the turnovers and then the ineffectiveness this last week. And it's just, you're in a playoff race.
Right.
and you need to, they're going to have to win a certain way, right? This offense is not going to be what we thought it was. It's not going to be a top 10, I don't think, scoring offense without Cousins here. But, Judd, I was looking, you got a top 5 scoring defense. There's 5 in the NFL in scoring defense. Like, make sense of that one after what we saw last.
They're a defensive first team?
Well, so it's completely turned upside down. And so they're going to have to scratch and claw and figure out. Now, I do want to see with JJ back, and, if he can have the spark on this offense and make things. Because the other thing is, Judd, they were running the ball pretty doggone effective until Madison got hurt there. I mean, he was getting, I don't know what his average was that yards per carry in the game, but it was for him. So, so I just think I understand what Kurt Warner was saying, and there's a lot of validity to what he's saying, but I think that the move is the right move for this team right now.
Yes, Roscoe, go ahead.
On Nick Mullins, all things being equal, if he was healthy, even after Josh Dobbs was acquired, do you guys think that was the preferred route for Kevin O'Connell and the Minnesota Vikings? And the only reason why we saw more of Josh Dobbs was because Mullins was injured, then came in and had that initial burst, leading the Vikings to 2 wins. I feel like Nick Mullins is the guy they would have wanted from the get-go if he was available.
I would say yes. And, he would have been the starter in Atlanta if he was healthy enough. I mean, they did not want to start Jaron Hall. They don't want to play Jaron Hall. They want this to be a developmental year. So if he was healthy, I think he would have been their guy. And so it's in the back, back injuries are weird. They're tricky, and you never know when they're going to flare up. And so, yes, I think he would have been the guy all along because he was the guy coming out of training camp, right? He was their number 2. He was going to be the backup.
And he's the guy that, keep in mind, late in training camp of 2022, they went and got him because Mannion and Mon were messes. And Nick, I mean, Nick's not great, but he's played. And the thing too is, I don't think O'Connell ever necessarily wanted to get away from what he wants to do. And the one thing that really concerned me though, Chipper, that Warner said was when he brought up, hey, these concepts don't really make sense, because you know what? We're not smart enough to like be absolutely sure that Kevin O'Connell is calling or designing great plays. Like we have theories and stuff, but you know, when a Hall of Fame quarterback is basically saying these routes don't make sense, it is a little bit concerning. And the other thing that you brought up that definitely concerned me, if it's true, was the whole O'Connell saying, well, you know what, Dobbs, he's had the plug pulled. Because what concerns me about that is that's O'Connell's story. O'Connell was a 3rd round pick who didn't play. Dobbs has played way more, but he was a 4th round pick. And this is no time to be feeling sorry for a guy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. I mean,
sorry.
That's O'Connell's nature, right? He's going to trust guys, and he's not going to be knee jerk. We've seen that. He's not a knee jerk coach. I mean, he's a guy that I think tries to take a level head with stuff. And so, but
he wants to communicate really well, you know.
Yes.
That's his thing.
Yeah. And I wonder, I would love to see how this offense and the route combinations, all those things were functioning when Cousins was rolling there before he got hurt versus what we're seeing now. Is it similar? Is it the same? Different? I have no idea. But this is, Judd, how often have you seen a team start 4 different quarterbacks in a season? I mean, you're talking about and different varieties, you know. I mean, that's the thing that's
2010 they didn't even, the roof collapsed. We just celebrated the anniversary of the roof of the Metrodome collapsing, and that didn't
How many
happen.
were there that year? How many were there? There's
Brett
3?
Favre, Tavares Jackson, Joe Webb, right?
Yeah. So 3 that year. And I think it's both a testament to the team and also an indictment on the league that they still control their own destiny in the God. I was talking to Reisner about this the other day. I was like, when you think about it, 0-3, you lose Cousins, you lose Jefferson. I mean, these guys should be booking excursions in Bahamas right now. But it's a testament that they've hung in there and won enough games to be in the mix, but also, let's be honest, it's an indictment on the NFL too, that all these teams are, I've never seen this. It's like a 20-car pileup on an icy interstate if you look at the standings.
Yeah. And Chipper, they're in the 6th seed. They're not even in the 7th seed. That's the incredible thing is
nobody's eliminated.
With the old format they're in. With the old format, they're in. And I mean, they're in, if they can play halfway decent football, they're in pretty good shape.
That's the thing. It's like, if you're eliminated by now, you're really bad because nobody's getting eliminated until the last thing. But it's, you know, and that I was going to write this, Judd. I know there's people that say, keep winning. You're going to get in the playoffs. You have no business. You're going to get killed by the 49ers. You'll get killed by the Eagles. You get killed by the Cowboys. Why are you messing up your draft positioning for that? And I just don't like that logic. I mean, winning matters. You take a season as far as it'll go, right? And if you get killed in the first round of the playoffs, that's as far as it could go. But just to be constantly worried about draft positioning, like, are you going to tell that to Daniil Hunter?
Well, that's the thing is players don't. Yeah, players don't.
Yeah, I was talking to Reiser, and Reiser's like, we fought our ass off to get back in this thing. And that's what you do. Sorry for excuse my language there.
Ass is fine. About that.
I was just repeating what he said. And I think there's something to be said about that. It's like, just keep doing trying to fight and claw and win. And then when you're not good enough, you'll be eliminated. But I don't understand the whole philosophy of this is fruitless, because I just don't get that philosophy.
And that depends on what the team wants as well, too, because, players and coaches do not quit. They're not going to quit. Teams can quit. So like at the deadline, if you had wanted to trade away pieces, you certainly can then. But, I mean, this has been such a weird year, too, because the start's maddening because it's based
Yes.
on what? Turnovers, which were your fault. And if you don't like, it's one of those rare occasions where you can unequivocally put your finger on the problem and say, eliminate 3 of these things. And this is a totally different year. And right now you're right in contention for a division title. Like that's the maddening thing. And my problem is I can't absolve O'Connell completely because he's the coach. So I know he didn't fumble, but I also can't, but this has been one of the more, well, intriguing in some ways because it's been so up and down as far as the roller coaster goes, but it's been one of the more maddening years too, because that 1-4 start, how many games did you have an opportunity to win if you could just hold on to the damn football, which you work on all training camp?
Well, the 0-3, I would say the Eagles are still better than you.
And you could have won that. The incredible thing, you could have won that game.
You could have, the fumble at the goal line by JT, but yeah, it felt like you gave that away as much as they beat you. Now, I give the other team credit for taking advantage of your mistakes, but yes, you that's a you problem when you're turning the ball over to the degree that they did. So yeah, I mean, you think about if they hadn't have done that and dug that hole where they might be and given themselves a little more cushion, but this season has felt like 4 different seasons to me.
Yes.
And some of that's because of the quarterback, the injuries, and you win 5 in a row, or then you have bad losses. So it's been so weird. And so I honestly, because of what has happened with their offense and the quarterback situation, these final 4 games literally could go anyway. I mean,
yes.
You just, and the way the league is, I mean,
well,
I saw a quarterback everybody's calling Tommy Cutlets, play.
Oh yeah, Tommy DeVito, the Giants. Yeah. Hey, Tommy.
I love that. Hey,
and Daniel Jones is like going to disappear.
I love that story, man. Can you imagine getting to cover that story?
The Agent was fantastic.
The Agent, that's incredible.
The Agent's my favorite.
It's like, you cannot make this up. You cannot make this up.
No. And with the Giants,
right
by where the legend of Jimmy Hoffa's buried in the old end zone of Giant Stadium.
That's what makes it so funny, boys. It's not nearly as funny if he's quarterbacking the Jacksonville Jaguars. It's hilarious.
No, it's a good story. No, it's a great story now.
Yeah. And but not, we look at the Cousins thing, but just the quarterbacks that have been lost this year in the NFL, it's just created, chaos.
Yeah. In fact, Ross, run through that list of Browns QBs as well, because they also have started 4.
Yeah, Chip, they've also played 4 quarterbacks this year, and I'm trying to dig up what is the record for an NFL franchise starting quarterbacks, but the Browns have also had 4 different starters. And they are Deshaun Watson, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, PJ Walker, and now Joe Flacco, who barring injury will be the starter the remainder of the year, per Kevin Stefanski. But between the Vikings and Browns alone, that is 8 different starting quarterbacks, and they're just 2 teams. We haven't even went down the list of other teams that have had injuries.
Yeah.
How many teams have lost their starting quarterback for the year?
I think right now
it's double digits, right?
Yeah, I think right now we're at 10 teams starting backups. I think that's what it is.
Man.
Well, Herbert's done for the year, right? If you go down the list, Aaron Rodgers likely done for the year.
Yes.
Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, it's nuts.
Watson, that's just 4.
Yeah, it's like 10. It's like 10 starters have been Giants. Daniel Jones got knocked out. But so Chipper, you bring up a really, and it's not talked about a lot, but to me, it's one of the most intriguing points, because I agree. This season has again really, really crystallized how long, and I know they don't play a ton of games, how long a season is though, and what the grind is like. And I come back to one thing: you're going to go to 18 games. Like 16 was like, it's been driven home to me more than ever. 16 was such a sweet spot, right?
Yeah.
Like there's still 4 games left right now. I mean, I'm sorry, but to put your players and their bodies through this, and you're going to go to 18, I just think it's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I feel like we have this conversation every year when you get to the final month, and we're like, and you want to add another game on top of this because the product is so bad. When you look at just how the injury situation, and maybe it's the recency bias. This has happened. I mean, you don't lose this many starting quarterbacks typically. But it feels like we have this conversation every year about injuries. It's like it's affecting the play.
Well, you don't need to add games.
Yes.
You don't need to.
And I understand it's a money thing, and we'll watch no matter what the product looks like. But it's when you think about what players are doing now just to get to Sunday or Thursday, whatever it is. I mean, we can scream and say the product looks bad, but as long as those checks are cashing, they're going to keep adding games.
You just can't. My issue is this: you can't claim you care about player safety and do this. Like, that's the thing. The attrition is so severe, right? And I don't doubt it when players say it's basically like going through a once a week car crash. And 16 games was still a lot, but it was just such a sweet spot. I just think it's ridiculous that if you are a team with championship aspirations, you still have 4 games left. And then you have the playoffs, which are another grind. And by the way, the tempo in the playoffs goes up even more.
Well, and it's why it's sort of boring at the time when we're talking about position battles in training camp and rookies and young guys and setting your 53 and doing these things. And it's, it may cause us to yawn, and it's probably not sexy to write about and talk about, but you darn well better have good backups, because those are the teams that are going to be able to survive all this carnage that you see throughout a season. I mean, it's why your scouts have to be good. It's why you got to draft good. Mm-hmm. It's why you can't have missed drafts, because you deplete your depth, your good depth. And so, it's as they add more games to a season, I think it puts more onus on front offices to be more right when they're building out their roster.
The other layer on the 18-game schedule, which I agree will happen at some point, it's been floated or hinted that they'll add a bye week, so maybe each team has 2 bye weeks. Well, then how do you go about being fair splitting up those bye weeks? You can't give one team 2 byes in the first 9 games and then somebody gets one week 6 and week 12, which inevitably will happen, but there are going to be some teams that look at their schedule and cry foul. I think one of the ways around this is to just not have preseason games at all, and all you're doing is inter-squad scrimmages. That might avoid some of the beatdown factor, but a lot of the guys we're talking about aren't playing in preseason anyways.
Well, and I don't know, owners aren't going to give up preseason games too, and the buys are good. Guys get rested, but I don't know if you're getting healthy. I don't know if your body's getting completely back to where it needs to be in 1 week. They're not going to turn it down. They're not going to, say we don't need it. And I'm sure it's valuable, but there's a reason why these guys take weeks off after a season to get their bodies back.
And from a selfish standpoint, as a fan of games, there's not an upside to playing 17 to 18 games because of the attrition that takes place. I want, for as long as possible, I want as many players healthy, and the math doesn't work. The more games you play, the more guys get dinged up and hurt. And I know, Chipper, you're exactly right. This is all about how much can we make, largely not because of tickets, but because of TV. But you're 1,000% right. Here, the one idea that the league is not glommed onto that I had a couple of years back and I still maintain. So I'm with Ross. Like, the preseason, the product in the first 4 weeks is so bad. It doesn't really help to play. But what I said a couple of years ago, or about 5 years back, is this: what if you moved two game preseason, Chipper, that you played in June with only young players? So your draft class, so you played actually 2 games in the month of June, because this league is eating up everything else, right?
Yeah.
And you did it with draft picks, UDFAs, and perhaps guys on a bubble of some sort, so the veterans don't play. Something like that, because we are going to go down to 2 preseason games once they get to 18 for sure.
And then take a break and come back in July for training camp, or just,
exactly.
Because there has
at the end of OTAs and mini camps, you play this one game or 2 games.
I like it, and it could be like any player under. Although, you don't want like
just
veterans
set it
there.
Right.
Yeah,
it's very similar to college in the spring games,
except you have to play a real game. You can't get away with this. Crap the Gophers do, where they have like a horse on jogging around the field.
Goldie runs the touchdown.
You can't do that.
Victor the Viking. Victor the Viking.
Play a real game. No, spring game. There's nothing more disappointing than being a football fan and going to your first spring game and realizing it's just a bunch of nothing.
It's a glorified practice. And at the U of M, they're never open to fans anymore anyways because of weather.
That's right. Yeah. I think anything should be on the table because, it's you when you look at these injuries, and maybe they just say, "Hey, violent sport, this is going to happen. Teams are still competing," but look at the product on some of these games, Judd.
I know. Well,
I mean, it's
the Vikings are on their fourth quarterback, man. The Vikings are on their fourth quarterback. You're not going to have a great product. You don't play four quarterbacks in a preseason game.
That's right.
You don't even have four quarterbacks.
You don't even have them on your roster. I know. But yeah, but to get back to the point, I mean, here they are in the month of December in their sixth spot, and they're going to finish up with 3 division games. So it's going to be fascinating to see how they cobble this together, because I think the defense is so good that they're going to keep them in these games. It's just, can they find a way to score enough points with their 4th different starting quarterback to win these games?
Last thing, Brian Flores, head coach or not next season? And if he is, who is he coaching, you think?
Yeah, I will be shocked if he doesn't get interviews.
He'll get interviews.
He should. He should. When you look at what he's done with this defense,
it's nuts.
I don't know what jobs are going to come open. I think he will be probably selective in finding the right situation for him. I think he can be. I think he's got a great situation here in terms of what O'Connell's let him do. Basically, this is your defense. I'm sure they're paying him well. He seems to like it here. Guys want to be head coaches, though. They want to run their operation. So I'm not saying this is going to be his, final job. So I don't know. I would be shocked if he doesn't get interviews, but he is so good. We talked about at the beginning of the year. It's like, I wonder how much difference does a coach make? Well, we're finding out. We're finding out, that question has been answered.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, Chipper. Roscoe, thanks much. Purple Access back next week with Tyler Forness. We'll talk to Chip again in a couple weeks. We will see you later.